I'm not hearing the music. There it is. Welcome, everybody. Good evening to you. This is Comic Book Radio, episode 158. I'm starting a little bit later tonight. Not too much later. Like a half hour later. I'm your host, Peter Cimetti. And we're going to be talking tonight. It's just going to be me. We're going to be talking tonight about setting. Location. Location. Very, very important in business and in your story. Talking specifically about how location impacts and benefits the story. If you're creating a story, how it benefits and impacts your story. If you're reading the story, well, you get the idea. King Cryptid, which is featured on the thumbnail, that location map. The locations in King Cryptid play a big part in the story. And truth be told, I think, honestly, every story, it's so important to take the location into account. To essentially even treat it like it's a character. Very, very important. So we're going to be talking about that tonight. Should be a shorter show than the crowdfunding show. I don't have 2 hours worth of content to talk about setting and location. Before we start, though, I want to say hello to those of you in the chat. Thank you guys for joining and being here tonight. Appreciate it. What Geeks Do Network is here. What's up, What Geeks Do Network? Hope you're doing good tonight. We also have Ben Spar here. What's up, Ben? Hope you're doing well. We got Brian in the chat as well. It says, hail everyone, still no home internet. I'll catch the replay at some point. Well, I hope everything's okay, Brian. You doing all right? All right. Well, I hope you're okay. I hope you and yours are fine out there, and that it's not too serious, whatever that may be. We got Shrek in the chat as well. What's up, Shrek? Thank you for being here. Rick Saylor, how's it going? We got Bobo in the chat. What's up, Bobo? Beampad is here too. Hope you're doing well, Beampad. Golden Tree TV is here too. How's it going, Golden Tree? Let me see here. I'll let the chat fill in a little bit more. I'm going to shout out the pinned comment that I had left. That's what these are called, right? Comments? 1 day left to get a King Cryptid embroidered beanie. Now, this is an Alterna Comics embroidered beanie. It'd be the same sort of quality, but the King Cryptid one is green with a yellow King Cryptid logo. Heck, let me show it to you. Now, what I mean by that is tomorrow is the last day to get yours if you do want one. $15. It's on the Indiegogo campaign that kingcryptid.com will take you there, or you can go to alternacomics.com/kingcryptid and get yours on there. If you scroll down a little bit to the apparel area, you'll see it. These are going to go into production. So if you want to make sure that you guarantee getting yours, go on there and order it. And these are a full moon special. We have full moon and new moon specials. That's because it correlates with the power set of King Cryptid. His powers are at their peak on the night of a full moon, and they're at their lowest on the night of a new moon. So on the full moons and new moons, we give you guys a chance to get something special, something that's generally limited edition, and sometimes it's actually even limited only to the campaign. I'll have some extras of this beanie after the campaign, but oftentimes the beanies sell out. We're very close to selling out of the red Alterna beanies for a third time. We've sold out of the navy ones with the red logo, and these are new. Navy with the white logo. But we sold out of hats, shirts, etc., etc. So as far as this goes, if you do want to guarantee yours, make sure you get it. $15. Shipping is $6 in the US, $25 in Canada, $40 international, and it's flat. So you can get as much as you want of whatever you want, it stays that price. $6 in the US, $25 Canada, $40 international. But yeah, so this is on both the Alterna site and on Indiegogo. And then also, of course, before I do the deep dive into tonight's topic, just touching upon the fact that we've got new comics on the Alterna site as well. 4 new comics on this campaign, 24 days left. I think it might be 23 now at this point. I'm going to do a show about this tomorrow, doing a full week catch-up, and also reveal Alterna Foil card number 7, which is a stretch goal on the campaign. If and when we reach $8,000 on the campaign, which we should be able to, it's going to unlock Alterna Foil card number 7, which is going to be King Cryptid. We're not going to be putting a T-Bird Alterna Foil card in that set, and we're not going to be putting one for Joe of Downcast and a couple others. So we're going to be sort of mixing up the space and stuff like that. Rights issues and all that. You know how it goes. But that's going to be a stretch goal on this campaign. Alterna Foil number 7. So that trading card will be a free bonus once we reach $8,000 on the campaign. It'll be a bonus to all the physical perk backers. Right now we've got 134 backers on board, and we're at 3,603. That's 51% of the $7,000 funding goal. And this is combined with Indiegogo. It's on Indiegogo as well. And the 4 new comics are Blood Realm 14, Horace H. Hoover number 3, and Unit 44 number 9 and 10. If you guys want to check that out, the links are in the description of the show. We got all kinds of great stuff here. These comics are also available in digital. You can get the 4 comics digitally for $4. You can get the 4 comics in print for $9. The 6x9 set is $8. The print and digital bundle is $13. And you can also do all these other bundles with it as well. I got an option on here. You guys can get a sketch card from me, a quick portrait sketch card, any character you want. It's $25. It's limited, though. There's only a couple left on the Alterna site and a couple left on the Indiegogo. If you do want one, make sure you get it. You can get, again, any character portrait you'd like. If it's an Alterna character, it's going to be on Alterna cardstock. If it's any other kind of character, it's going to be on my personal cardstock. And that's $25, and you get the comics. So I'm taking a little bit of a discount here for you guys on this to get this going for the campaign. All kinds of other great options as well for art. All kinds of other great stuff too, especially on the Alterna site. So check that out. We got lots of great stuff here. Advertising perks and whatnot too. Premium advertising spots. That's back cover, inside, front cover, inside, back cover. 20% off on the campaign for the first 30 days. All right, let's get back to the matter at hand. So the King Cryptid location map. That's what I was showing in the thumbnail, and that's what this is. So this is a map of New England, which is largely at this point where the King Cryptid series takes place. All these places are real. We got Mount Washington, New Hampshire, Jackson, New Hampshire, Franconia, New Hampshire, Lincoln, New Hampshire, Ossipee, New Hampshire, Dogtown Village in Massachusetts, which was the name of the place, which is current day Cape Ann, Gloucester, around there in Massachusetts. Back in the day, 1821, that's where issue 7 takes place in the beginning, and then it goes to present day in Jackson, New Hampshire. Bridgewater, Massachusetts, that's where issue 4 takes place. So we got all kinds of different New England areas in this series, and there'll be more that we highlight throughout the course of it, and eventually we'll leave New England and we'll have different issues in different places and even different times. But the thing with this, with location, it's very important. King Cryptid largely being a man monster of the forest and the mountains of New England. That plays a big part in the story. So if you've got a city, if you've got a forest, if you've got mountains, desert, the ocean, suburbs, urban area, rural, all these different things play a huge part in your story. That's where everything takes place. People often overlook this aspect. I know it's a very obvious kind of thing, but you'd be surprised. There's a lot of people who don't really take this stuff into consideration when they're talking about their books, and especially when they're coming up with stories and coming up with characters and character design specifically. Thinking about where your story is going to take place at large, and also specifically per issue or per story, whatever that may be, that will really help inform your decision making. And when you're a reader, it also will help for you to expand upon the story, both within it when you're reading it and outside of it. So as you're thinking about what's taking place. If it's a city, there's all kinds of things that are going on, obviously, that will inform the reader as to what is occurring and what can occur. And when you're a creator, you can play that up. It's kind of like a little bit of playing up psychology when you're a creator. You have to make sure you're utilizing these things effectively to have certain elements of surprise in there, certain elements where you can build, have literal world building take place, which does inform your character development. It's a very, very important process. Depending where these characters exist, it's going to decide a lot of different things about how they look, what they're like, what kind of personality type they may have, character design is a big thing with that. You're going to really be thinking about, as a creator, in terms of what you're doing. These characters are going to be in a certain spot, in a certain climate, in a certain region. Maybe they're not even on Earth. So you got to think about that as well. And there's all kinds of different things that go with it. Now, it's easy to get derivative with it and turn it into something that you've seen 1,000 times before. Sometimes that will work because it makes sense. There's a reason why it's been done 1,000 times before. And other times it's interesting to play with that element, with that trope. And you could really flesh an interesting story or a very unique looking character that stands out, that isn't just the same kind of character you've seen maybe 100 other times before or something like that. But again, sometimes there's always going to be, and you have to decide these things as a creator. When you're creating your stories and you're making your characters, you have to decide, what am I going to emphasize? What about this is also going to stand out? Silhouette in character design is very important. You know, you want it to be, and what I mean by that, if you don't know what a silhouette is, it's the outline of the character. If the character is backlit and you see a shadowy type figure with just the light around them, creating an outline. You can think of a lot of characters. You can tell if you just saw their silhouette, who that character is. That's a strong design. Now, if your silhouette is taking on the shape of all these other kinds of iconic characters, that's something to consider. How do you mix that up? If your character standing there looks just like Batman, looks just like Spider-Man, looks just like a lot of characters that come to mind that have strong silhouettes, poses, etc., you want to think about changing that up. You want to think about how can your character stand out and be different. Even if the character is similar a bit, you want to find something that can still make them different. Now, they're not going to be as known, of course. That takes time. But you want them to stand out. I'm going to get to the chat right here before I continue on my path of what I'm talking about. Let's see. Rick Saylor says, look at that amazing blanket. Well, Rick, you would know, man. You would know. You got that King Cryptid blanket. Thank you, buddy. Rick says, alternative website has the most to offer. Best prices in town. I appreciate that. Hey, AL, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. Charlie's here, too. What's up, Charlie? Thank you for being here. No worries about being late or anything like that. I'm running late tonight, too. I started the show at 9:30, so you're not as late as you may think. All right, so location, going back to King Cryptid. So, like I said before, this is mostly a character that exists within the forest. There's mountains. There's all kinds of things like that. Now, we do have issues that take place in a swamp. There's issue 5 that takes place during a blizzard. All these different things will inform my storytelling decisions and what the characters do. Specifically in a swamp, you got all kinds of things going on. You got all kinds of swamp life. The ground is a bit different. It's obviously swampy. So you got all kinds of water and dirt and soil and mud and all kinds of creatures that wouldn't exist in a mountain, that wouldn't exist in rural parts of a certain area, that wouldn't be in a city. So it's important to play that aspect up. So there's a lot of different things that happen within that region that wouldn't happen anywhere else. When you're thinking of character creation, there's really important things here in terms of storytelling. I'm going to get out of this for a second. In terms of storytelling, when stuff happens within the story, sometimes it'll often feel like characters are existing in a void. Sometimes it may even look that way. If there's no background around them, if there's nothing like that, and if it goes on for too long within the storytelling, it can really be disorienting to both the characters sometime and also definitely to the reader. So you want to make sure you are grounding those characters within their setting, reminding not just the reader of where they are, but also reminding the characters where they are. And I know you might think, like, what are you talking about, reminding the characters where they are? Okay, so if characters keep on existing just within their plane of, I talk to them, they talk to each other and that's it. It's just a group or individuals or an individual. And there's no backgrounds that they're interacting with. There's nothing that they seem to be concerned about with in regards to the location. The location is not a character anymore. It's not even there. You're crafting now something that feels very dull and lifeless. The background's going to help bring about life, really expand on the situations at hand. Where are they? What kind of room? What kind of area? What kind of just, not just the location, but literally the atmosphere that they're existing in. It's so important. And there's a lot of these times where I'm noticing that certain stories, it feels like everything takes place in a void. And then all of a sudden, the setting's around and exists. It needs to be something that's always present. And if you can have mood within that setting and location, if it can have a feeling and a vibe, if you think about something like, we'll talk about Batman. If you think about Gotham City seems to be a character unto itself. It seems to be something that lives and breathes and exists. That there's things that happen here for some reason, and things look the way they look. It always looks like it's in night, like it's in darkness. As opposed to, and I know Denny O'Neil, I believe, talked about this for a while in terms of, Metropolis always being shown to be bright and sunny, and it always perpetually looks like springtime. And then Gotham perpetually looks like late fall, sometimes winter. It looks dark, it looks cold, it looks damp, it looks miserable. And even though, obviously, you could have these two cities existing within the same plane of a season, they're going to look very different and feel very different. So it's stuff like that you have to think about, and it crafts the storytelling decision and your character development. The characters are going to be different within those environments. Now, if you don't have like a fictitious city or location or anything like that, like a Gotham City or a Metropolis, and you've got something that's more earthbound, more that's New York or Chicago or Los Angeles or some place in Europe or this or that, any place on Earth. You also want to make sure then that you're doing your research into how these places actually look and what it tends to be like. Now, if you're coming up with your own entire story and it's a completely different world, a different planet, no Earth-like stuff whatsoever, now you have a bit more freedom. But with that freedom and creativity, you got to still make sure you're grounding that story within that location. Do you understand the rules that you're setting up for this location? Then you got to think about the atmosphere, the gravity, the kinds of plant and animal life, the building structure. What are all these different things like? Rob Geronimo with Blood Realm at Alterna does a fantastic job with his world that does not, it's not Earth. They exist in this area, this land called Mordrin, and it's a very dark and kind of desolate place. But then there's immense structures, very complicated architecture. Tyler Wentland with Red Koi does a tremendous job with his architecture as well within his region, which is similar to Earth, but not quite Earth. So there's all different things, but you have to make sure that the rules that you're setting for this plane, this existence, this location, that you're following them, because otherwise you're going to create a lot of confusion, not just for the reader, but you're going to create confusion for yourself if everything feels like it's just happening because. So coming up with your own world, your own place, it is very freeing, and you could be really creative with it, but you got to make sure that you understand within that creativity, now you're setting and creating rules for an entirely new plane of existence. So it could be a lot of fun, but it could also be a daunting task. Looks like we got a question here. Michael says, interesting point about grounding the character in his setting. Good take. Would you ever diminish the background and bring the character into sharp focus to emphasize one dramatic character moment? Absolutely. And that's something to use sparingly, of course. Because otherwise, if everything is kind of like that, it's like if everything is emphasized, then there's nothing that's of emphasis. So if every single word is an exclamation, then what are you exclaiming about? At that point, it's all just at a different level, but still monotonous. There's still a monotone quality to it. So if everything is like a mood shot and emphasizing something, then there is no real emphasis ever. So it's important to be able to use that as a storytelling technique. Otherwise, no one's going to know that there is an emphasis, and they're going to think this is just cutting corners to have close zoomed in shots whenever possible and not draw background or get away with drawing a full body or something dynamic. But yeah, absolutely. Use that effectively. It could be a really strong storytelling technique. And you could also really get into the headspace of these characters and how they're behaving. And the same thing goes with coloring too. I'm seeing a lot of coloring nowadays, and thank you, Michael. Good question there. I'm seeing a lot of coloring in modern comics that some of it's great, absolutely great, but so much of it, there's a tendency now towards going towards the literal. And what I mean by that is that a lot of great coloring in comics, and in anything really, color adds a psychological factor to art. There's a lot of psychology behind color and certain colors and emphasis on color and the push and pull when using color. Certain things sink to the background, certain things can get pushed to the foreground depending on what colors you use. Color theory, of course, plays a part in that, but then color theory sometimes is also used in a literal sense as well, as to, let's say you've got a red sky in the background for emphasis. This is the world. This is what it looks like. Now, the tendency could then be to create this reddish, Mars-like looking world where everything is red hues and that kind of a thing. If you want that, sure, you could do that. But do you have to be literal with that? Now, let's ground this to Earth. You can have moments where all of a sudden it looks like there is a red sky. It looks like there is yellow in the background, pinks, whatever it may be, and something that doesn't seem to make any sense in the context of literally depicting the time of day, the location, all that kind of stuff. When you're emphasizing mood and a moment, and you're trying to also make the central figure pop from a scene, you have to understand what kind of colors you're using effectively. Now, again, it's the same thing with the way to emphasize anything else. If you constantly are doing that all over the place, it's going to look like there really is no emphasis at all. If you think about a lot of comics for the longest time, you'd have background characters all in like a light blue or like a light pink or a light yellow, or, you know, something that offsets and complements the main central depiction of what's going on within that panel or that page. And all of that was about making a focal point. But if everything is colored literally, in what I mean is a literal sense. So if you colored this and in this background, and I had all kinds of images here, and they were all colored literally, you're going to lose a lot of what the focal point is supposed to be. Now, if you want me in this frame to pop out, this would all be kind of colored in a monotone, whatever it may be. Maybe a light blue, whatever. A color that could go and sync to the background. Cool colors sync and fade away into the background. And warmer colors, bolder colors, darker colors are more in the foreground. Some people will look at their drawings or their comics and they will color the backgrounds dark because they're back there. The things in the background are dark. Don't do that. You want to color the things in the background lighter and the things in the foreground darker. You're going to have that effect. Now, it works even in real life. Now, that's where a nice artistic element with the art and the coloring matches with the literalism. Because if you go out and you go see any kind of view, things in the distance fade. Sometimes they fade almost into obscurity. You can't really see details on them. You can't really see the coloring that great. They don't get darker just because they're further away. That's something that it takes time. I know it sounds like you just say it once and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But when you're drawing, a lot of the times when people start coloring something, they'll put everything that's in the background really dark, and then the foreground will be lighter. And their method of thinking that way is usually because when it's further, it's darker, it's in shadow. You can't really see it. There's light source being lost. And then when it's closer up, the light source is maybe stronger on it, so it's lighter looking. If you draw and you color especially with the coloring, because that's mostly what this pertains to, you're going to notice a huge difference in depth of field with your drawings if you have the colors lighter within the background, especially something that's in the distance. Get lighter and lighter and lighter with it depending how far away it's supposed to be. If it's really far away, it's going to be very faint with the coloring. If it's very close up, you're going to have bolder colors. You're going to have darker colors on it. Doesn't mean, though, that you color it black in the foreground to make it stand out, because then you're going to lose detail. You got to think about the fact that, and I know this goes off a little bit about setting, but you have to think about the fact, too, that shadow is what defines form. So when shadow is defining form, that's when you're going to actually see what something is. If everything is completely lit up, no shadow whatsoever, you're going to lose a lot of what the form is because there's no shadow there to define it. So depending upon your light source and the angle and all of that, you're going to have the form defined a certain way. Now, you could also play with your light sources. You don't have to also be literal with that. Some people go, well, that light source doesn't make sense with the way that's being lit and this and that or whatever. Now, depending upon, again, what emotion you're trying to elicit with your art and within that scene, your light sources might not end up making any sense whatsoever, but it's going to look like an awesome image. It's going to create a feeling. You might have a scene all of a sudden, if you want to depict, and it's happened time and again, you want to depict a character that looks like they're up to no good, or they're standing and they look sinister. Usually the lighting will come from the bottom and illuminate to the top, and it creates a very moody look. Does that mean that there's actually someone down there with a light shining it up? Probably not. So it's really important to understand what kind of emotion, what kind of mood with the art. Now, the setting and the location also plays into that. So, for instance, if you've got a night setting, everything's dark, right? For the most part, let's say King Cryptid #1, that's in the forest. In the forest, in the middle of the night, good luck seeing practically anything, all right? Now, in King Cryptid #1, it's dark, it's at night, it's in the forest. Does that mean that every page then is colored in pitch black? Sure, I guess we could have done that. We could have been bold about it. I don't know how interesting of a comic that would have made, but it could have been done. But we opted instead to have more of a subdued color scheme that relays to the reader. It's dark, but it's not pitch black because we need to still see what's going on. Same thing that goes with, and I know this has happened before with the Alpha Flight issue when John Byrne did the whole thing white because they're in a snowstorm. But we're going to have a blizzard issue, and it's going to be still depicted where you can make out what's going on. Will you get a sense of the wind and the snow and all that? Yes, you will. But it's not going to be snowblind, losing any sense of imagery and form. So that's also something important to think about when you're crafting your story too. You got to think about, don't be too literal with the coloring and with your light sources at times. And I know some people will be like, but that really matters. Of course it matters. It matters in terms of when you have that light source and you're trying to depict a moment. You're trying to depict a certain kind of scene. It matters in terms of staying consistent within that light source. But what the hell that light source is and where it is and what it's doing and when it's taking place, along with the coloring that occurs within that moment, that is up to the effect of, all of those are tools to elicit emotion. You have to view it that way. If you're not eliciting emotion within each panel, each page, the way you're telling your story's going to come across like a big, giant, monotonous blur. It's going to be the effect of when you kind of squint your eyes to make everything blurry so you can make out the tone and the values of certain things. A lot of that's like a old artist trick kind of a thing. It's going to look like a big blob mess because there's no tonal value. There's no differences. Nothing pops. It just looks like a same washy. I mean, it's not necessarily a mess, but it's going to look very dull. So you really want to make sure you're putting color in there that pops. You're putting colors in there that play on emotion. The scene and the setting plays on emotion too. The angles, the composition in which characters are. You're creating a work of fiction, which means that every choice within that work of fiction, and I know a lot of people when they read books, they've said this kind of thing too, it'll take them out of it. You need that immersion. And you need that, and you will get that when you understand that this work of fiction, every choice is what you or your creative team in its entirety are making. So when someone says, well, I can't do this and put them here and have them stand there or have this over here because that just wouldn't make sense. You have to understand you are the one that makes it make sense. It's the same thing that happens when people go, well, who would win in a fight with whoever and this and that? Whoever the writer wants to win that fight. And it's up to the writer to write it so that it makes sense for the outcome. So you could have a character that looks like, man, they're going to get smeared. And they end up winning or surviving. Why did that happen? It all depends on how that writer writes it. Now, if they write it convincingly, it comes across and it makes sense. If they write it and it sounds really stupid and makes no sense, and let's say this character that shouldn't be able to do what they're doing in a physical capacity or any other way overpowers that other character out of nowhere without explanation, then that's bad writing. So all these things, all these decisions are made by the creators and the storytellers. And that goes right down to even why a character is facing and looking in a direction in which they're facing and looking. Every single thing is your decision. None of this is happenstance, and none of this is a documentary in which you're relaying non-fictional events. You don't have to be historically accurate to, well, they're doing that and they're over there because that's how it was. That's what happened. And we're being true to the events. No, this is fiction. This is dramatic. This should be played up to full effect. So that's the mentality to go in there. And when you do that, you create exciting storytelling. And you create character-defining moments as well. That's how you get all these iconic kinds of scenes, too. is from people creating things that feel larger than life and play up on the emotion of a scene and the drama and the dynamic nature of whatever's occurring. Take all of that out of it and say you just want to be literal to a T, and you don't think that that's how that could play out, and that's how that would look, and that's how they would stand, and that's how they would pose, or they would be, or they would look in terms of when they're in a certain scene in a moment. You take all of that out, and congratulations, you probably made one of the most boring comic books in the history of time. You want to play everything up as much as you can. You want to get that emotion out there, get the energy out there. It's so important. And it's not just about superhero stuff or anything like that. It's within everything. There's incredibly dramatic pieces of art that have nothing to do with superheroes, that have nothing to do with action even. It's the composition. It's the character that exists within the setting, which is essentially what the composition is. The composition is how you frame it. How you frame it. So this right here is the composition. Now, if I'm like this, or if I'm like, there's all different ways to frame that. If you're in the corner, what is going on when you're framing it? How is that happening? You have to think about that as the composition. That is your frame, however you want to make that, however you want to expand upon it, make it as large or as small as you'd like. Now, you only have so many pages. The page is only so big, and you only got so many things you can fit on the page. And then in relation to how many pages you're going to put in your story, you have to maximize the pacing. You have to maximize your page count. And I don't mean make it as big as you can. I mean, if anything, understand that you have to tell as much story as you possibly can with as little pages as you possibly can. And it doesn't mean that you go in there and throw up on the page action and art and words and everything else. It means you go in there and you edit, and then you edit again, and you look at it, and then you revise and you tweak, and you go, is that necessary? Or can we convey this 6-panel thing with 2? Can we take this scene that I'm writing for 4 pages and put it to 1? Does it really need to do that? Or sometimes you go, this 1 page, we really need to break that up into 2, because the pacing would be so much more effective to draw it out a little bit more, because it'll make the emphasis, the emotional impact. Every single thing's a setup and a punchline. That's how it works. That's how you get that push and pull. That's how you get that tension and release of storytelling. And the whole thing is a constant roller coaster throughout the whole book and throughout whatever story you're telling. And if you don't have that and you don't utilize that effectively, your story can feel flatlined the entire time. Now, a lot of modern storytelling loves to have this weird flatline, and then at the end, oh, something happens. Who says that this whole entire time the reader isn't like, man, when's something going to happen? Are they waiting for the last 2 pages for something to happen? You see it a lot in modern movies, especially. It feels like you watched the whole stupid movie and then the last 20 minutes something happens. Maybe. And then when it happens, you're like, so that's what that was? That's impressive, huh? I'm so blown away with how smart you are. Because they're thinking too much. It's too cerebral. It's not coming from the heart. The emotion isn't there. If you're putting emotion throughout, then you're going to get someone to capture their attention throughout the entire time. But you need to have those different things laid out throughout. Now, again, you can't have the whole thing being like, because then it's going to feel, oh my God, what is going on? This is a bit nauseating. But you have to have that tension. And it's got to be a nice wave. And then you can have a spike in a moment that feels like it's a twist or something that's high impact, comes out of nowhere. You can have that, obviously, and it's not so much a formula as it's a recipe, because you could even start with the spike at the top and then go down like this and then have it carry the momentum throughout the rest of the story. Where you want to put that climactic moment or moments within your story is going to help with the pacing or hurt the pacing, depending on what you're doing and how you're telling the story. but you need those moments there, and you need a variety of them. So I'm going to get back here to seeing what's going on in the chat. So we got Gerald Lang here. What's up, Gerald? Says the most important thing to do when using real-world locations is research history, people, and details of the location. This I'm doing for the Shokai books. Even creating worlds, this helps. Gerald says, just like using reference for the visuals, it's good to use real-world reference to create made-up locations and worlds. Add a recognized aspect even to the mysterious. Yeah, absolutely. What Geeks Do says, hey Pete, any ad space left in King Cryptid 5 through 9? Let's take a quick look. I think there's some. Let me see what's available. Let's see. So, ad space for... Alright, so for premium spots, all the back covers are always an additional flipped cover. So we don't have back cover ad spots, just in case. Inside front cover for number 9, number 8, number 7. And then inside back cover, we got one left. That's for number 6. And then we got full page spots for all of them, for 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So the full pages are 25. The inside back cover is 50, which there's only one of. That's for issue 6. And then we got inside front covers, which are 75 each, and that's for 7, 8, and 9. So that's what we got left. So we do have a bunch of different things left, but especially if you want a premium spot, not too many of those left. But we do have at least one of each left for full pagers between 5 to 9. All right, let's get back to here, and thank you for your interest. Michael says, more cowbell. We need more cowbell. Exactly. Think of the emotion in your story as the cowbell. You need more cowbell. You got a fever, and the only prescription is more cowbell / emotion. The Elk of Antioch says, Blood Realm is the only true color scheme. There you go. Black, white, and red. It reminds me of what was that, Windows like 98 or something when I was a kid, and they had all these different color schemes you could have for your desktop, and they were all garish and frightening, but they had these different names, and you could select. In this instance, you would select Blood Realm, and everything would be red, white, and black. Kier, what's up, Kier? Speaking of a dude who knows how to put together a composition. Charlie says, if you're writing a story in an already existing culture, you must explore all forms of research. 100%. Yeah, having researched so much about Eastern European Slavic culture, it's an entirely different world. Yeah, totally. And then the setting goes hand in hand with the time period. Hand in hand. You know, so you could have it set in... we'll just go to New York because so many comics have been set in New York. You can have it set in New York, but when? When in New York? You know, so you have to think about that, and then you have to research that. There's a tremendous amount of that goes into it. I've seen a lot of comics do it well. I've unfortunately seen a lot more do it poorly. And again, it feels sometimes too like I don't even know where or when this is. And not even like I could ballpark it. Because if I could ballpark it, that's cool. But I don't know, judging by the cues of the location and a lot of other things happening, I have no idea when this story would be. And that's a problem too. Now you can have a timeliness in regards to certain things. Like King Cryptid, I would say, is set between like 2015 to 2020, if you want to think about time-wise. But does that mean that even though that's a time period that has certain advanced technologies, are we going to see selfies all over the place? Are we going to see smartphones everywhere? Are we going to see, Victor Lugo on Twitter or something? No, that's a storytelling decision to not do that. There's tons of people out there doing a lot of different things in the world, and they're not running around 24/7 on their phones on Twitter or social media or taking selfies or whatever. that's something that when that's put out within comic books is geared to a specific audience. That's storytelling, whether it's a comic or a movie or whatever. It's playing up a demographic. Whether they're correct about that demographic or not is entirely up for debate. But that's something that takes place again. It's a storytelling decision. It takes place within the mindset of whoever's crafting that story. And they think that this is something relatable for the said audience. Now, that's not my goal in terms of creating something that's necessarily relatable on that front in such a specific way to the audience. And obviously, you guys all know what these things are. I'm trying to relate on a deeper level. I'm trying to relate more on a thematic level. So there's various themes that play out in terms of things that may resonate with you or may not resonate with you. But they're broader and they're deeper in terms of what those things are. It's not just the specificity of here's a piece of technology. And doesn't that make you feel comfortable? And don't you now relate to this? That turns, I think, most stories into a fleeting, buzz, wordy sort of thing. It makes them so trapped in that moment in time as they're trying desperately to relate to something specific within a moment in time that go 5 years into the future, and people are going to maybe look at that and either not understand what's been referenced, or they're going to cringe at it and go, ooh, I don't know about that, depending on what it is. So it's always not necessarily safer to play up an evergreen kind of theme, but it'll resonate more with people. It goes back to that emotion aspect. It's the same kind of capacity in which if you guys have seen Enter the Dragon, in which Bruce Lee is telling that student that he needs emotional content. And he wants the student to be there with him, present, in the now. Not thinking, not lost in contemplating the moment or what you would be like or how you would react or anything like that, but to just be present and react. And then counter. And then move with the motion of the moment. The whole scene with him saying it's like a finger pointing to the moon. That thing, right? Focusing on the finger, you lose the moon, essentially. So if you're focusing and thinking about the thing that seems to be present in front of you, you're going to lose all the other things that actually do keep you in the moment. Because you're focused so heavily on thinking about how do you be in the moment that you're actually removed from the moment. So it's the same kind of thing that occurs within the context of storytelling and the context of setting up your scene. If you are so consumed with your story in terms of keeping people in the moment, you actually lose them from it. And what I mean by this is okay, so here is an example. If you're consumed with putting these characters together and here they are in their scene and they're trying to achieve an objective. Now, you want people to be caught up to speed. You want them to know who's who. You want them to know why they're doing what they're doing. You're doing an info dump. You're doing things that you think keep people in the moment and aware of the situation. When you could do the exact same thing in a more exciting way, actually keeping the reader in the moment by keeping the characters in the moment. Because the characters in the moment would not necessarily be talking amongst each other about the things they plan on doing and being very expository about it and relaying to the reader, along with to each other, all the things they already know about, all the things that are going on, all the things that are... It's a very strange device that a lot of writers will do as they have these characters talk among each other, trying to talk to the reader. Now, when the characters talk among each other because they're keeping each other aware of something that's occurring, that's a way to get information to the reader without doing it. But if you want to keep the characters and the reader in the moment, You keep them constantly moving forward towards their objective. There's no moment in time where they stand still and then they outline the plan. That kind of a thing, it's happened in writing, it's happened in storytelling. We're not talking about it's like the heist and then they're showing this and that and they're talking about here you are and you do this and you do whatever in that kind of format. But if you think about most of the ways where that scene is pulled off effectively, as they're talking about it, they show characters doing things. And it's not so much a show don't tell either, because show don't tell it can turn very bad and very awkward, and you could lose clarity if you're obsessed with show don't tell. So what I mean by that is that if you never take the time to tell, if you never take the time to actually have writing and any sense of character development or interaction or dialogue that's taking place, even narration of some kind or exposition on a different level, if you never take the time to do any of that, if you're catching the gist of things right now, everything's about balance when it comes to this stuff. So if you never take the time to do any of that stuff and everything is show, man, you gotta be really good at what you're showing. You gotta be really good at it, and your artist has to be top notch, whether that's you as the artist or someone you're working with. And you gotta make sure that what you're showing is vital. Now, if you can do both, show and tell, but not be redundant. So I don't mean go into it and you talk about literally the same thing that's occurring within the art. Now you're just kind of wasting everyone's time. There's a tremendous ability there that you have where you can show imagery that add and push everything forward while telling and adding depth to the story, to the character. Something that either juxtaposes what's occurring or something that relays character defining moments or describes the scene further than what needs to be shown. So there's a lot of different things you could do. There's a lot of tools and weapons in your arsenal as a storyteller that you could take advantage of. But there's a tendency in modern comics where you look at the page and maybe it's like one balloon or caption per panel. If you're lucky. I've seen books where I got done reading them in 3 minutes. Because I think there was one book I had read that was a total of, I think, 17 dialogue balloons / captions in the totality of the book. 3 minutes, done. And the art wasn't ridiculously detailed. It wasn't anything that you could really pore over. There wasn't a lot of storytelling within the art. It was very straightforward. 3 minutes. I got done with that book and I read it again because I thought I had absolutely must have missed something the first time. And it's not like it didn't tell what it told. It's not that there was confusion, but the artistry of the storytelling completely lost. It just felt like I was reading the back of a cereal box of like, yeah, that's what the cereal has in it. And here's a little story about whatever the heck they wanted to put on the back of it. But that's it. You just walk away from it and you're like, all right, well, I get what happened, but I don't feel anything. It didn't leave me thinking. It didn't leave me feeling something. It didn't leave me anticipating what's going to happen. That was it. And when there's no artistry behind it, when there's no vision behind the writing, the art, the composition, all the aspects of the storytelling, the scene, the location that's there's nothing that leaves you wanting more. There's nothing that leaves you thinking about things to come. There's nothing that leaves you even wondering sometimes about the events that transpired, and not in a way that makes you think, well, why did they do that, but in a way that makes you think about the possibilities thereof within that world. When there's nothing in there that does that, to me, that is when a story is a failure. It doesn't mean that failure is fatal, but that's something that team, if they even get a second chance on that book, I really think that they need to reassess what they're doing, because they're just not packing the book with enough emotion. There's not energy in there. It's a very monotonous flat line. And it's a rush to finish it. And because they're rushing to finish it, they're not taking their time to tell that story. Remember, you're a storyteller, not a story shower. It's different. Showing and not telling. I get it. But there's a lot of things that you should show and not tell. And there's a lot of things that you should tell and not show. And then if you use them both effectively enough, you can create a very compelling narrative where you have the opportunity also to make it engrossing and immersive and maybe play upon the emotions that you're creating to elicit a twist, a surprise, a reveal, something along those lines that doesn't subvert expectations because you're not outlining them. You're not expecting the reader to feel a certain way necessarily and then trick them. What you're doing is, if you do it right the whole time, the reader, when that reveal occurs, can backtrack throughout the story and might even think along the way, something about this situation doesn't feel right. And not like, oh, this is bad writing, but that ominous feeling you get when you're immersed in a story. So it's more about making sure that you're not subverting anything, but that the whole entire time that was your plan and purpose. Not that it's just out of nowhere. Here's a character behaving out of character. Here's a scene that makes no sense. Here's something that's being put in there just for shock value or surprise or a twist or whatever it is, just to have a gotcha, aren't we smarter than you kind of moment. But that the whole time you can track it and look back and go, oh man, shouldn't have trusted that guy. Shouldn't have trusted this scenario. This was a bad thing. You know, when you're reading it, you're like, this feels off. It feels like it's a trap. It feels like something doesn't add up. It's a little too easy. Sometimes you might have characters that even feeling that way and saying it out loud too. They go through something that feels like, man, you know, the one character talks to the other and they're like, something about this doesn't add up. It feels too easy. You know, you can have all these different things that relay information to the reader while you're reading and going into the story. But you also have to have your characters. You have to have awareness and intelligence among your characters and write them as such. Writing the characters as if they're just pawns on a chessboard and they just move along as you want them to is also not going to do them any service. You're not going to develop them. You're not going to have an engrossing scenario. You're not going to play up the emotion that you're looking for. And the setting plays a big part in that. A big part in that. Let's look back here. We got Michael says, cinematic lighting and color grading is the difference between an artistic film and a documentary. Charlie says, yeah, dude, different time periods on top of a different culture is like doubling how much you need to learn. Exactly. And you have to do it. You have to do it. The same thing too for characters that are going to like it's said that when you write a character who's the smartest character in the group, all it is that they arrive at the answer faster than everybody else. Now what that answer is, that's dependent upon you. What that situation is, you can create a situation where you figure out the answer and then reverse engineer it to create the puzzling way in which that question is being posed, whether literally or figuratively. And the smartest character will figure it out first. Figure it out faster than anybody else. And that's what makes them smarter, is that they figured it out so much quicker. You can have other characters act impressed if you want, or, you know, I don't know how you did it. Like in Fantastic Four, you get that a lot. You know, Thing being like, I don't know how you did that, Stretcho, blah, blah, blah. You know, you're so smart, and all this other stuff, or even mock him for his intelligence. You know, you can have these character moments where you do that. But that's an easy way to do something like that. But when you have a character that has a certain perspective, a certain experience, their age is a certain way, whatever it may be, whatever kind of perspective you want to impart upon them, you also have to understand, does that make sense? Can you back that up? Does it not just sound right, but does it feel right? So there's all these different character defining moments. That's a whole different kind of topic. But in relaying to the setting, absolutely. Time periods, man, that's a big, big important thing. The where and the when, very important with defining setting. That's all setting practically is. Michael says the series Bodies on Netflix uses the same location in 4 time periods, parallels the stories and characters around a specific location. It says you can reveal a lot about a setting or world by simply showing how characters are interacting with that setting. 100%. A lot of the time, when you treat especially the setting like a character, it's these characters within that setting. I mean, think of like The Predator, the first movie. So with Predator, you get them put in this setting. The setting unto itself is a character that they have to survive in and interact with. Throw in then something else in the mix, and that's when you have this, what the hell, they're already up against enough that seems like this is a tough place to be in, and now they've got this other thing, this other unseen force of nature as far as what they're concerned with until later on. So you have these things where you interact within the environment, and the environment sometimes is punishing, is absolutely stronger and more brutal and uncaring than any character you could have come up with. And that creates also a compelling story. So treating the environment, the setting, as a character unto itself, in addition to anything else you might have, can add a lot of depth and a lot of intrigue into the story. Metatron's Cube says, I like the Ghibli style of immersive realism. The fantasy never feels out of place. There you go. Charlie says, on the opposite side, I've noticed in a number of late 90s and 2000s Western comics, there is either too much dialogue or it doesn't flow well. Manga seems to be the opposite. It's weird how well it flows. Yeah, again, you need that balance. More importantly than balance sometimes, especially when it comes to art and storytelling, you really need harmony. Like a good piece of music, you need the harmony. You need everything hitting the right notes of when they gotta hit them. You know, so you can have things balanced, but if they're not balanced and harmonious, you're gonna have things that feel and sound and look really bad. So you need both. You absolutely need both. But in terms of what you're talking about, yeah, I've seen that. I've absolutely seen that. And it's a shame, too, because sometimes there's so much of the writing that it monopolizes the page. And the art takes a back seat, which is such a shame sometimes, because you can get some really nice moments by having the two work in tandem. Ben says, great explanation, Pete. You've got to strike such a delicate balance between visuals and the dialogue to keep the readers engaged and want to see what happens next. Yeah, 100%. It's very, very important. And the more you're going to, and it goes back also to a couple other elements, but this one specifically, the more you're going to have writing within the book, the more, like I just talked about, it's going to monopolize the art. Because it needs to exist in a plane. It's not like it's a movie or a TV show or whatever where you can have audio and you can have visual. So the visual and the audio can almost exist as two separate things. You know, in certain different kinds of genres and certain kinds of stories within that kind of medium, will use that effectively. You know, horror being one of them in terms of sound up against visual. But in a comic, everything's existing in this two-dimensional plane. So if you've got a lot of writing, guess what? That's going to minimize the art. And if you've got a lot of art and you want to make sure it's there, you're going to have very little room for writing. Now, that could work. I think it tends to work more when there's more art than writing. But it can work effectively when it's used in just the right way and sparingly enough. Sparingly. Moderation. It's not even something that should be flirted with, because moderation would kind of mean like, oh, you're sort of using it here and there and whatever else. Sparingly use these tools. These are very effective tools Think about them being like the ace up your sleeve. If you're constantly pulling out those aces, someone's going to look at you and go, you're full of it. There's no way. Then they're going to take you around and rough you up. So every one of these things is an ace up your sleeve when you're going to utilize certain moments effectively to provide that emphasis. You got to make sure you're using it sparingly. And Charlie says, yup. Okay. All right, that's it. That's for the hour. It's very, very important. Again, like I said, as far as the setting and the location goes, it's a whole character unto itself. Very important to build that character as well. You want to develop your setting. You want to make sure it is a living, breathing thing within the story itself. You want to make sure that you understand how that works within the realm of the story and how the characters interact with it. How they do that. How they exist and interact within the setting, within the location, is going to matter a lot to not just them, but to the reader. And you want to make sure you understand that. Because if they exist in a void, if they exist in an emotionless plane, man, that's going to be... You're making your work a lot harder than it needs to be as a storyteller. So really, develop your setting, develop your locations, make sure that you are utilizing that effectively. Otherwise, that is one hell of a storytelling weapon to leave in your arsenal and say, nah, I can just get this story up and running with just the characters. Okay, well, if they don't exist within that setting, and that setting doesn't exist to be interacted with, that's going to be a difficult sell on that story. But all right, guys, thank you very much. Once again, we got King Cryptid. This campaign is up here. We got 917 total backers. We're $58 away from 33K on this specific campaign. This is for issues 5 to 9. 1 to 4 are available right now. This campaign is currently being run on the Alterna Comics site and on Indiegogo. So if you want back either or, the King Cryptid embroidered beanie, which I showed earlier tonight, it's a second chance to get it before we go into production. Guarantee you get yours. If you do want this, guarantee it. $15, and it's available on both Indiegogo and right now on the Alterna site. And then before I go, one other thing as well with the Alterna Comics April lineup campaign here that we have going on. 4 new comics. Get Blood Realm 14, Horace H. Hoover number 3 of 5, Unit 44 number 9, and Unit 44 number 10. These comics are four comics for $9. You can get them $4 digitally if you'd like, and no shipping, of course, digitally. But 4 new comics for $9. We got 24, now 23 days left on the campaign. 134 backers on board, and 3,603 raised out of the $7,000 goal. Make sure you get these, support these creators, get these books brought to life, and all that good stuff. I'll be back on the Alterna Comics channel tomorrow night around 9 o'clock, and I'll show you guys the Alterna foil card number 7, which will be the $8,000 stretch goal for all physical perk backers. And also, keep in mind, we also have these Alterna series trading cards too. These are available for purchase, but they're also bonuses, automatic bonuses for all physical perk backers. That's card number 17, which is Horace H. Hoover, and card number 18, which is the Blighted from Blood Realm. So those are bonuses for every physical perk backer, but like I said, you could also purchase them separately if you'd like. Or if you're a digital backer, you can purchase them and get them sent to you. All right, guys, so that's about it. Everyone have a wonderful evening. I'll see you guys hopefully tomorrow night on the Alterna Comics YouTube channel to just go over that campaign a little bit more and give a couple other updates as well. And I'll see you then. So 9 o'clock Eastern tomorrow night. Everybody take it easy. Have a wonderful evening and an even better tomorrow. See you guys soon. All the best.